Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the macroeconomic frameworks behind what is honestly the most important economic shift of our lifetimes. We're talking about the machine economy. We're going to break down a really fascinating concept called the machine economy stack, or the MES, and look at how it interacts with this incredibly dynamic market force known as stack gravity. If you've been wondering where capital is actually flowing, where the literal bottlenecks are right now, and where true strategic leverage sits in the age of AI, well, this is the foundational blueprint you absolutely need to understand.
So let's just start by pinning down exactly what we're analyzing here. The machine economy is this massive, emerging system of automated economic activity. It's a vast global ecosystem, and it is entirely dependent on a very specific sequence of things: physical inputs, raw compute power, advanced reasoning, physical embodiment, and finally, economic settlement. We are definitely not just talking about desktop chatbots here. We're talking about a completely new paradigm for automated production, supply chains, and real-world value creation. It's basically a fundamental rewiring of how work actually gets done.
Here's our quick roadmap for today. First up, the machine economy stack. Second, refining the dependency sequence. Third, the dynamics of stack gravity. Fourth, dependency versus value capture. And number 5, the migration of leverage. Okay, section 1. Let's establish our foundation, the machine economy stack.
This framework maps out the architecture of automated value creation through a super strict 5-layer sequence of dependency. And the golden rule here is that you absolutely cannot have a layer above without first securing the layer right below it. Think about a fully autonomous delivery drone. Down at the base, layer 1, you've got your physical inputs. That's the raw lithium for the batteries, the copper for the wiring. Layer 2 is energy and compute, so the actual electricity to charge it and the onboard processing hardware. Layer 3 is logic and reasoning. This is the AI model itself that lets the drone recognize a stop sign or avoid a pedestrian. Moving up, layer 4 is embodiment, giving all that logic a physical form, right? The actual rotor spinning and physically navigating the world. And finally, layer 5 is settlement. This is where the machine acts as a legitimate economic actor in the real world, maybe paying a digital toll or managing its own liability insurance. So this stack represents the fixed, absolute reality of how machine labor is built from the ground up.
Moving into section 2, refining dependencies, because, any good framework has to evolve to reflect reality. There's been a really vital update, moving from MES 1.0 to MES 2.0. In the older framework, physical execution, or embodiment, was actually placed below reasoning. But as the whole machine economy has matured, it became super clear that we needed a structural refinement here. In the revised, canonical ordering of MES 2.0, Layer 3, logic and reasoning, now sits firmly below Layer 4, embodiment. Now, you might be wondering, why does a simple swap matter so much? Well, it's because reasoning mathematically, conceptually, and logically has to precede physical execution. Think about a robotic arm on a factory floor. Before it can effectively manipulate some delicate object, there has to be a world model, a logic layer that interprets the sensor data, understands the physics of what it's touching, and plans the action. The reasoning is a strict prerequisite for the physical movement. You can't just build a metal arm and hope it magically figures things out, right? So the true dependency sequence flows from materials, up to energy, up to reasoning, which then unlocks physical execution, culminating in settlement. It's just a much more internally consistent way of representing how autonomous systems actually function in reality. All right, section 3, stack gravity. We've got our fixed map, but a map doesn't really tell you where the traffic jams are. For that, we need a dynamic variable. Okay, if you remember just one thing from this entire explainer, make it this. Dependency does not equal value. Let me say that again. Dependency does not equal value. Just because every single layer completely relies on layer 1 raw materials does not mean the raw material producers capture all the economic value. It's kind of like building a city. Every single building relies on concrete, for sure, but the concrete supplier doesn't capture the lion's share of the city's wealth, do they? If you only look at the stack as a fixed sequence of dependency, you're going to fundamentally misread the market. You'll totally miss where the real leverage is accumulating. So, to understand where the value actually piles up, we have to look to stack gravity. While the stack itself is completely fixed, stack gravity is dynamic. It moves. It is the real-time concentration of unresolved constraints, pricing power, value capture, and strategic leverage within that stack at any given moment. Think of the stack like the physical, rocky terrain of a mountain. Gravity is like a massive, incredibly heavy boulder rolling up and down that terrain depending on market conditions.
And wherever that boulder finally settles, that is exactly where businesses hold the most power, command the highest margins, and basically dictate the pace for everyone else.
This really illustrates the dynamic perfectly. We have our fixed, permanent 5-layer dependency substrate on one side. Those structural rules of the stack, they never move. But overlaid right on top of it is stack gravity, our moving reading. Notice exactly where the center of gravity is sitting right now. It has dropped down to layer 2, energy and compute. This is without a doubt the most critical bottleneck of the entire machine economy today. We've got massive data centers desperately trying to come online, but they are totally gated by the harsh realities of local power grids and processing hardware availability.
Section 4. Dependency versus value capture. Let's look at some actual empirical market evidence to see exactly how this gravity migrates over time. Let's trace the recent market history for a second, because this is where the theory gets highly actionable for all of us trying to figure this out. Back in Phase 1, the early AI boom, capital, attention, and those massive valuations were completely absorbed by Layer 3, the AI models themselves. Intelligence felt like the scarce resource. Everybody wanted the smartest foundational model. But as those models started to really scale, we entered Phase 2, which is our current build-out. Suddenly, the models aren't the primary bottleneck anymore. The physical infrastructure required to run them is. Energy generation, liquid cooling, data centers, electrical grids, these are the dominant constraints today. And inevitably, we're going to hit Phase 3, where new constraints emerge once today's power bottlenecks are finally solved by all this massive infrastructure investment. So the locus of gravity essentially dropped from Layer 3 during that early AI boom straight down to Layer 2 where we are today. Intelligence became, well, somewhat abundant, or at the very least, highly competitive and commoditizing. Meanwhile, energy and compute infrastructure became severely constrained. And here's the core principle. Gravity always migrates toward whichever layer contains the dominant unresolved constraint. It really doesn't matter that Layer 3 is technically higher up the dependency chain. If the market is starving for Layer 2 power, Layer 2 is exactly where the pricing power and strategic leverage will violently concentrate. Finally, Section 5, the migration of leverage. Let's bring this all together. How do we merge these two distinct frameworks into a single strategic lens? The absolutely crucial takeaway is this. They are not competing frameworks. They're complementary. They are literally two halves of the same coin. The stack is your fixed structural substrate. It defines the absolute rules of physical dependency, meaning you just can't skip layers to build an autonomous system. But stack gravity? That's your dynamic, moving reading. It tells you where the value capture and the constraints actually live today. Mapping out the static stack is completely insufficient on its own for anyone trying to navigate or invest in this space. You absolutely must overlay the dynamic pull of gravity to locate actual market leverage at any given moment. You need the map, for sure, but you also desperately need to know where the traffic jams are. Which leaves us with a pretty vital question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. The stack's dependency always points up, right? You always build from materials to energy to logic, but gravity, as we've just seen, can easily drop down. So what can be learned when dependency and gravity point in completely opposite directions? What happens when the foundational layers suddenly wield all the pricing power and all the leverage over the advanced intelligence layers that they're supposed to support? That exact tension is dictating the future of the machine economy, and it's exactly what we'll be exploring in our next explainer. Thanks so much for joining me.